I'm Sherry Weinberg. My formal name is Sarah, so you see it on the screen as Sarah. I'm not going to bother to change it. But those of you that know me know that I'm Sherry. I'm the current president of the Washington chapter of Physicians for a National Health Program. I'm glad to have this monthly membership meeting. I also need to let you know that I live on Mercer Island. And Mercer Island was once had three Snoqualmie tribe villages on it, and they were part of what we call, as a larger group, the Coast Salish Native American tribes, of which there were many throughout the area that all moved up and down the Salish Sea, fishing and trading. So they're still here, although they have to put up with an awful lot of us. So tonight I think everybody here knows that we have Dr. John Geyman, who's going to speak.
I'll just talk about what our chapter's been up to recently, and then Hugh's going to say something about our new SNAP chapter students that have come into our area from various parts in the country, and we hope are going to be beefing up our SNAP chapter here in Washington State. Activities of our chapter in the past couple months have been very heavily into collaborative work with other single-payer organizations, and the most prominent of those is Puget Sound Advocates for Retirement Action that has really been leading the charge across the country, and their strategy of, quote, level the playing field, which means that rather than calling right now for the end of Medicare Advantage, have Congress add the benefits that Medicare Advantage has, as well as take away the financial incentives, because Medicare Advantage people are really, really low on their initial cost premium, but if they get sick, then they get jacked way up, and it's hard for them to get out of it. So anyway, that's something to talk about. The level of playing field strategy is to ask Congress to give traditional Medicare, hearing, vision, cap on out-of-pocket expenses, dental. So that's the strategy. They have produced a book called Give Us a Real Choice. They just printed 500 copies of these and sent them out to big shots all over the country. And in fact, they sent 50 to PNHP National to send around to chapter leaders. It's a compendium of about 10 or 12 lead articles in their monthly newsletter called Retiree Advocate. And I wrote one of the chapters on the ACA REACH program that we struggled and finally seemed to win our battle against having everybody, quote, accrued into ACO REACH programs out of traditional Medicare without their permission or knowledge. So that's in here. The forward is by Pramila Jayapal, who lives in our congressional district here, a couple miles down the road from me. There's a link to that pamphlet, a PDF on PSARA's website, place where you can download this yourself, but it's really beautifully put together, bound. I was part of a delegation of PSARA that met with HHS regional staff a few days ago about the level of playing field strategy to, beef up traditional Medicare, because if it's basically equal as far as cost to seniors, then we're definitely going to tip the balance in our favor, and that's probably the end of Medicare Advantage. WPSR, we've been working with Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility on a healthcare, not welfare program. So this is going to be at least 6 or 8 town halls across Washington State that talks about how the military industrial complex and weapons are siphoning money out of healthcare and the social determinants of health, and we've got to fight to stop that. So far, there's 3 meetings that have been set up. The first one is in Olympia at the Olympia Center on April 25th. There's going to be one in Tacoma at the First United Methodist Church, May 4th, and Seattle, the Plymouth Church on June 1st. And there will be others across the state. And the details and speakers in the agenda haven't been completely worked out yet and will be determined. That's with WPSR. We've been doing collaborative work with them. And then there's another one coming up on March 6th. We had a big rally on the Olympia Capitol legislative steps. There's about 110 people there. So it's a rally for universal health care, and we wanted to talk to the representatives as they were coming out of the Capitol. And Hugh Foy gave a little talk for us, and there was, I think, 10, 12 other speakers. But out of that is coming a new organization or collaboration called the Washington State Universal Healthcare Advocacy Group that hasn't met yet, but it's in the process of organizing. And hopefully this is going to bring all these organizations that are in favor of single payer together. And, it'll really strengthen our movement in Washington State. As far as PNHP national news, there's a push for each chapter to bring on more members. There's a Medicare Advantage harms study that's going to be released in mid-May. And probably most of you know about the PNHP study last fall called Our Payments, Their Profits. That was very influential and quoted, that documented the overpayments to Medicare Advantage plans. So this is going to be a similar study. It's kind of secret until it's suddenly released, and there'll be a lot of press around it and so on, but it's looking to be really interesting. I was at the PNHP board meeting the other night, and somebody did say, keep this a secret, that they found that the average provider in this country spends 35 minutes every day fighting for pre-approvals, or if something was not allowed by their insurance program, fighting to get it covered. If you take 1 million providers across the country, that's 35 million minutes every day is wasted on this fighting the disapprovals and stuff from Medicare Advantage. Hugh, you want to say something about new people in our area?
We have been contacted by the national office, and we have 7 residents that are coming to start their internships in June here in Seattle that are active members of SNAP. One, she sent us a message that one of our residents from University of Washington, but he's going to Vermont. There are 5 of them that are going to be in programs at the University of Washington, and one that is going to be in the family medicine program at Swedish First Hill. David and I were very excited that there was also one surgery resident going to join the University of Washington. So we've reached out to all of them, and I don't know, David, if you've heard back from any. I have not heard anything back from the email that went out to them, but we do have their contact information.
This summer we need to get together and, in a more formal, informal way, and, face to face, and, have a 7-up together or something.
Right. And if any of the students are here at the meeting tonight, feel free to contact either David and I. We've lived in Seattle for 47 or more years, so we know the city very well. And both of us have worked in the university system all over the city. And David also worked at Swedish. I never worked directly at Swedish, but I guess I worked at Providence, which is now part of the Swedish Providence complex. So in any case, welcome.
I'm Dana Iorio. I'm the vice president of PNHP Washington, and David pretty much explained the sign-in process and the question and answer period. So there's not really much I need to say at this stage. I would like to welcome you all and welcome to John Geyman, our featured speaker. Without further ado, Sherry will introduce our speaker.
Well, I apologize, John Geyman, that I did not look up your biography in order to list all the statistics. Let me just say what I know. I know that you trained as a family doctor and practiced for several years in a rural area in California. So you had a lot of experience in primary care, which is what you got when you're practicing in a rural area. And that you then somehow ended up at the University of Washington, where you chaired the family medicine department for some number of years before retiring from there and moving to Friday Harbor, which worked well while you were still flying. I'm assuming you're not still flying.
No, I just stopped about 3 months ago at 93. Yeah.
Well, I think that's probably a wise decision not to be flying anymore. But we used to enjoy the fact that you would fly down to Boeing Field and come to
Yes.
the meeting that we had here. And I also remember, I'm not quite sure what year it was, but it was pre-pandemic that I met you and Emily on the plane on the way to Philadelphia for the PNHP annual meeting. And
Right.
we spent quite a bit of time together at that meeting, as well as the plane ride back home. Oh, and I forgot to include in there that Dr. Geyman was on the board of PNHP and was president for a year. I don't remember or when exactly that was.
It was 03 to 05.
Okay, 03 to 05. And of course, we're all here because we know that Dr. Geyman has been quite an author of books on the need for health reform and documenting what's wrong with the system we have now. And I have a whole bookshelf devoted to the copies of your books, John. I've been terrific books. I have not made it all the way through the current one, but I'm well into the book and I'm enjoying it very much. So without further ado, John, let's hear from you.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be here and amongst friends that I haven't seen for some time and around the country. And just a little bit of background. I always wanted to be a family physician. Before I went to medical school, I ended up at UC San Francisco. And back then, you looked around for a general practice residency, and I took an excellent one at Sonoma County in Santa Rosa, California. 3 years, excellent, and then moved to just where I wanted to go. My wife Jean and I got married the first part of medical school, and we were 6 years in Mount Shasta, 63 to 69. And then in 69, family medicine became a specialty, as we know, the 20th. And so, my medical school didn't have any family docs on the faculty, but they had a psychiatrist who wrote a grant under regional medical programs. Remember that, RMP? And so I got a call in the middle of the afternoon with someone in labor across the street and a packed office and blah, blah, blah. And I figured it should be family docs that direct and lead these programs. So pretty soon I was down again in Santa Rosa, shifted it from GP to family medicine residency. And then I'll be very brief here. I spent a couple of years in University of Utah, but then came back to UC Davis and enjoyed a number of years there in developing their family medicine residency network in Central and Northern California. And then from there in it was up to Seattle, and I spent 14 years as chair of the family medicine department, enjoyed it a lot. And then I found that, believe it or not, and I was surprised to understand that I actually enjoyed the process of writing, but you couldn't write and record the history of our field and the healthcare system without untying from practice. So 7 years of practice, and since then I've done full time on writing, and I wrote the first book on family medicine in 1971. It was Appleton Century Cross, the second biggest New York, in New York City, publisher in the country, and found the leader of that endorsed and made happen the Journal of Family Practice. Over its years, I ended up editing journals, that one, and then Journal of the American Board of Family Practice for a long time. Anyhow, so that's how I got here. So now, what I want to do with this book, but first to explain, all my books were on healthcare, one aspect or another, whether it was Obamacare and what happened to that, or many other things, long-term care, etc. But in the last two books, I forced myself to go national with the politics of the country, because it seemed to me that the national politics has everything to do with where healthcare is. And so 2 years ago, I had the book on how disunited we are in the country. And then back a couple, 3 months ago, this book. So now let me launch into a few PowerPoints. I know they can be boring, but I think they will enliven your interest because they all say so much. So here's the book, Corporate Power and Oligarchy. And I end up with a somewhat positive, though imperiled, chance of how we can come out of it. Here's a quote that I really liked, a Supreme Court Justice in the last century: we must make our choice. We may have democracy, or we may have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we can't have both. And here's one that I liked immensely. David K. Johnston wrote a book on big farm countries, companies, and how they use plain English to rob you blind. But here's his great quote: "Citizen United is to the expansion of corporate power what the Big Bang was to the beginning of the universe." So now we're moving on. As I said, we go back 75 years or more, and here's with pre-Reagan years and then Reagan years, and since, the growing gap between productivity and pay. Just look at this, in 79 to 2021. Look at the big area, and but hourly pay did not keep up. It was way down. It's been a very unstable, polarized country. As we know, the Southern Poverty Law Center does a lot of this kind of work. And look how far across the country actual secessionist sentiment has developed. Here's the CEO worker compensation ratio. That tells the same story since the mid-60s. It's just huge what is up there. Here's the rise of the top 1% of the country and the bottom 50% since 1980. You can see what's happened to most of the country, much of the country. This corporate thing has not wavered at all, and we'll get a little more to that in a minute too. then as a result of that, as we now well know, the middle class has just eroded terribly since the early 80s. Look at this, the middle class is compared to upper income is way down. So what happens on the private side? Well, you all know this well from Medicare Disadvantage. You know how much the insurers rip off the policies, and you know about uplifting of codes, how they do research on patients that are seen just so they can bill and upcode for that visit. Look at this one. In the last 20 years or so, the public programs, Medicare and Medicaid, have been more and more taken over. And here over here, as you can see, where Medicare Advantage, which is a disadvantage, comes out over 50% now of Medicare. So then, okay, here we'll see some markers now. Also, what's happening. By the end of the first pandemic year, the combined net worth of the richest Americans totaled $4 trillion, more than 4 times the price tag of the economic relief package being debated in Congress now. Matt Stoller wrote an excellent book looking at the last 40 or 50 years, and here's his observation about 10 years ago. In previous eras in American history, the wreckage caused by such widespread looting would have led to substantial legal reforms, and there were some, but the key innovation that the corporate structure exists as a mechanism for the extraction of cash from insiders from either the company itself or from the market that a company monopolized was here to stay. We can see all these changes that have not been reversed and are in the current public debate with the election now coming up. Here is, we know that lots of what's going on in social media and other parts of the news cycle, ranging from Fox News across the board too. But we've seen a huge change in the Republican Party, as we well know. And in general, this is what Kurt Anderson pulled together of these big changes. The far right tells us government is bad, believe in our perfect mythical yesteryear. Establishment experts are wrong. Science is suspect, entitled to our own facts. Short-term profits are everything. Liberty equals selfishness. Inequality is not so bad. Universal health care is tyranny, see? Yeah. So now, and as a result, what we would expect, much of the public in both parties don't trust our national media as much as we used to. And the same thing, of course, which we know well, is the Supreme Court. So then, as we look at the election campaigns going forward, this will be a major issue, which we know, which has strong Democrat support and many independents over abortion and reproductive freedom. Here is the head of the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU School of Law and author of his excellent book last year, The Supermajority, How the Supreme Court Divided America. So here's what he had to say a couple years ago. Over 3 years, in June 22, the Supreme Court changed America. It overturned Roe v. Wade, repealing the protection for abortion rights in place for American women for a half century and putting at risk all other privacy rights. It radically loosened curbs on guns amid an epidemic of mass shootings, and it toppled the ability of government agencies to protect public health and safety and stop climate change when the topic is a major question. The court crammed those decades of social change into 3 days. So then here are other side effects or results of what's been happening for 40 years. the typical employee at 50 publicly traded corporations would have to work for at least 1,000 years to earn what their CEOs make in just 1 year. And the US now has the highest economic inequality of any major developed nation in the world, with the wealthiest 1% now owning 1/3 of the country's wealth. 1/3 of the country's wealth. Let's go for another few. Let's compare taxes in Eisenhower's years, and you can see how the tax rates of the top 1% were up there pretty well, but since 1970s or so, the bottom just about equaled them. Then here, corporate versus individual income tax revenue over 110 years. You can look way back there 100 years ago, and they were pretty equal, the big corporate income tax and individual, but not since. So these are long-term changes. I'm trying to make the point that they've been here a long time, and it just shows how we've been overwhelmed by this evolution. Now, here's average Trump tax cut for the wealthy, dwarf those for working families. You can see how the top 1% did so well compared to lower income people. And then federal campaign contributions from billionaires the last 20 years. Look at that. Before 2010, it was way down there. Look what's happened in the last 12 years or so. Just all there right in front of us. And here is a cartoon about what all this dark money is. Look up here, down here, we're overwhelmed. So how does big money control elections? They control election spending, much of it. They donate to election deniers, and there are ongoing organized efforts in states, many states, to keep that going. There's a lack of criminal justice for corporations in general. Voter suppression in the states has been active by this American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC. They do bad stuff all the time. And then gerrymandering, of course, change your district and your state to increase the clout of one party over the other. I like this a lot. As we know, Robert Reich, UC Berkeley, founding editor of the American Prospect and author of The System, Who Rigged It and How We Fix It. His take on this: a half century ago, when America had a large and growing middle class, those on the left wanted stronger social safety nets and more public investment in schools, roads, and research. Those on the right sought greater reliance on the free market. But as power and wealth moved to the top, everyone else, whether on the old right or the old left, has become disempowered and less secure. Today, the great divide is not between right and left, it's between democracy and oligarchy. Now, let's see. Ongoing voter suppression happens. As I mentioned, election deniers in the electoral process. Many states around the country restricting use of drop boxes for absentee ballots. That happened in Arizona and other states. Control of elections by big money is just huge. Conflicts of interest, especially among big money sources of income for or campaign donations, and intentional disinformation. Look at what billionaire campaign contributions have done in the last 12 years. Huge number over here, and just 2 years ago in the midterm. Here, I kind of like this one. This is the changes in the Republican Party. Over the years, look at Nixon back there. The expressions are pretty wild. Bottom line, the 2020 midterms were fair without election fraud. That's proven. abortion, reproductive rights, and inflation were key issues, and they will be again. The process that's going right now is marked by the failure of the GOP to govern in Congress. Look what's happening with their second speaker. They can't get anything done, cozying up to Russia, potential very bad geopolitical result if Trump were to come back into power would be very bad. And Trump has delayed everything along the way. I hope he's going to get his due in the next several weeks. The Trump campaign on dictatorship, which he tells us what he wants to do. It's very complex, as you know, to follow what's happening on the legal front. This is a summary. It changes week by week. And whether we get the Manhattan trial to a decision point before the election is an important question now, as we well know. So then here, however, there's a debate, and this circles around to the start of this book. We are being fed the deal that the economy is bad. It isn't bad. Paul Krugman knows that it's good. Here is a chart showing how we came back from pandemic era losses in the Trump years, and we're in a solid place. But one of the reasons for this, and it's key to this whole book, is watch it yourself, and you'll see that the media have a hard time saying that corporate greed is a big part of inflation, but it really is. Not enough people want to take them on for that. Here's the bottom line right now. It's a huge deal what happens in November if the Democrats win the White House and control of Congress. Look at what that means for us. Democracy alive, fair elections, rule of law upheld, corporations more accountable, antitrust regulation in progress, small business prospers again, multicultural society possible now, Supreme Court reformed, media open base on truth, American dream is possible again. On the right, Republican control with control of Congress, wow. Oligarchy, authoritarianism, big money restricting voting rights, wide open without rule of law, corporations unaccountable, unregulated system, minimal small business, increased inequality and inequities, no reform, untruth with controlled media, and the American dream continues to not exist very well. So the stakes in this election, as we well know, are huge, but what's happening now would be a main point is what has been developing over a long period of time. Well, that's a start, David. I hope that engenders some conversation.
Okay, well, great presentation, Dr. Geyman, and a totally prescient topic for questions.
The major TV networks are calling for Biden and Trump to declare their willingness to debate. Some feel that the inevitable media circus will not benefit voters, and that Trump, with his foment of the insurrection, does not deserve to present himself in public. What say you about debates? Yes or no?
Well, I can see how Trump would not want to debate. He has both feet in his mouth all the time. He has no policy. And it would become all too obvious to too many people very quickly, I think. So I'd be very surprised if anything close to a debate took place.
Well, I hope you're right. I worry that Trump would use it as a platform to stomp around and say nasty things to Biden and otherwise alienate a lot of us, but play to his base. And whether that would work to energize his base or not. So I have worries about a debate. That he's not good at following rules.
No.
I think that what I've read at some point is that a good strategy will be actually to promote Trump's insane, word salad and point out, so I'm sick of hearing about Trump in the media, but at the same time, what I've read is that one of the Democratic Party strategies is to promote his, nonsensical and vicious dialogues and in order to get people upset enough to vote for Biden, that's one of their strategies. So I don't know what I think of that, because I'm so sick of hearing about him. He would just wish he would disappear from all our lives, but we got to make that happen.
Well, I remain surprised that his own judges don't want him to talk. And so I'd be surprised. But I think it would make even more clear across the electorate if he did debate, there's just no choice. So if it happens, that would be okay too. Yeah.
I've been impressed with how petrified over the last 60 years our vision of a single-payer healthcare reform is. There's been no imaginative transformation that could be taken in an action format to the general public to inspire, empower, and move people to a direct vote. And I've put into the chat at least a half a dozen policy issues that were developed by 40 of us over a period of a year that are built into the website that the 40 of us put together called ourhealth.pub, that fundamentally transform our whole notion of healthcare that we take to the people for a population-owned and based system. And I was wondering, John, you've written all these books. You spent this enormous amount of your life essentially trying to drive ideas into the movement to be translated into action. What is your sense of how that's worked? And if it has not, to your satisfaction, do you see a way for us, now all of us are mostly elders, but do you see a way for us to bring the hammer down in order to change what we've been doing, what we've been saying to the people that would be transformative and inspiring?
Well, let me come back with two thoughts. And I go back to David Himmelstein and Steffi Woolhandler, Jim Kahn and Don McCann. And I worked on a paper a year or so ago. And because, David and Steffi go back to the 1987 with the start of PNHP. Since then, they and most of us have been very disappointed in the lack of progress towards single payer. They took a trip several years ago into the UK and came back thinking we should have the word system in our national setup of a new system, including basically getting around the current corporate power of running hospitals. So that was interesting. We never did publish that, but that's one response. And the other is some states, as we know, even right now, are trying to do their own state program. A number of states, including Washington, are involved in that. One of the big challenges to that would be getting aboard federal funding that's already aimed at healthcare into your own state program. And that can be a major problem, bigger than maybe most people realize. So those are two responses.
Real global model, I believe, is Cuba. Cuba has a people-owned system, and it's the most ideal system on earth and yet it's been vilified and essentially, pushed out of people's view and but that's where the great service system is from the bottom up.
Yes.
Everybody should go to Cuba, and when they come back, we ought to do something together, which we've not, thousands and thousands of us have been there, but when we come home, we don't swing the hammer together.
And you can see why it's been vilified.
Yeah,
It's a good system, so lies about it, don't even consider it.
I was a family physician in England for several years. I trained there, and I came to the States in 1976 to the Department of Family Medicine at UNC, and at that time hoping that maybe the USA might develop a better system of care, akin to the UK system. But what I now know is that the UK system of National Health Service is falling apart, and it's in dire straits due to severe underfunding. So my warning would be that if you have a single payer system, it still depends on the people who lead at the top and provide the money to run it. And if they hold it back, you will still fail.
Very good point. Don McCann, what would you say in California?
We wrote that paper in The Nation, a year or two ago, that indicated that the issue of ownership of the system is now come into play because of private equity has been taking over, and they've bought out physician groups and so forth. And our system has really been ruined by private enterprise, and the health insurance companies have been buying up a lot of the system and so forth. So ownership has been an issue. And so, we've indicated that we should be looking at that issue. So we have said that, well, maybe we should be looking at the British system to a certain degree, in the sense of community clinics, public hospitals, and so forth. But then lately we wrote one of our Health Justice Monitor articles we wrote was exactly the point that was just made, and that is that the conservative government in England has underfunded the system, which has been a disaster, and that they have had severe problems as a result. 30 years ago, it was a fantastic system, but since it's been so severely underfunded, public ownership, if it's the government and dependent on could you imagine what if we had a publicly owned healthcare system now, and then Trump was elected the next time, what would happen to it? So it's a real dilemma. Some say, well, maybe we can do it in a semi-public way, not having the government per se own it, but you can't depend on charity to run our entire healthcare system, and you have Musk, there's an article this week that about Musk. The judge just ordered his company to take another vote as to whether he is going to be paid, what is it, $50 billion or not. And when you're worried about $50 billion for him, for his automobiles, and you're not worried about the public's healthcare system, I tell you, yeah, I'm just behind John for those people. I was a freshman when he was a senior, and John has been my idol. That's partly why I'm here. John was a senior who got the gold-headed cane, and for my entire career, he's been my idol. And I don't the bookcase up here, the tons of Geyman books up there. And I tell you, we've discussed this issue many times, and I'm spending too much time on this, but we've got to do something.
The rich have been able to buy out of the UK system from day one. It's always been bifurcated. It's
Yeah.
not a true single payer system.
Yeah.
Cuba is the only true system, and we need to be able to embrace that and deal with the red baiting that would come with it. Otherwise, we're not talking about transformational system change and public ownership.
So this week, what they do are, what was it, our ambassador to one of the Spanish countries had some exchanges with Cuba, and they're arresting him, charging him for, he wants to cooperate with Cuba, and they're charging him with some kind of espionage or something. So we're not supposed to cooperate with Cuba either. Oh,
Let's get arrested.
maybe that's what we need to do.
Let
We
them
gotta
arrest
do
50
something.
doctors. Let them arrest 50 doctors.
Yeah.
Can I say
Lorna,
Hi. I thought I understood that the British system was funded by a hypothecated tax. I understood that that means there's a tax that only goes to that system and nobody else can eat it and take it away. It's just for that. And so I'm interested in the Peter Curtis's information on how it really works.
Well, money is set aside for the healthcare system, but the amount of money, the pot of money, is decided by the government.
Right.
And if they want to, build a few more battleships and drones and all that kind of stuff, then they're going to cut back on the healthcare system.
So
And
it's not a pot of money that people pay into that's
no, it's
actually-
it's paid as a kind of a health insurance payment that comes out of salaries, everybody's money, everybody's income.
And the Jayapal bill? What about the Jayapal bill and AB 2200? Have they essentially addressed that question of isolating that money from legislative censorship? Do you know?
I don't know that.
I don't either.
The only thing I would say about the British system is that if you have all the physicians employed by the government, even though they're allowed to earn private money as well, you can have private practice, which many specialists do. The doctors have a union, and the union has decided recently that they need to go on strike. So the junior doctors have been on strike. I think it was about 6 weeks ago.
In England?
Yes. A 1 week strike, which might, expand, but that's the power of the union. And the government was going to have to do something about it, because then the population, and the British population is pretty passive, I can tell you that, will start getting upset.
Isn't Labour going to be elected in this coming election? Labour instead of the
Probably, yes. But who knows what they're going to do?
Yeah,
exactly. That doesn't guarantee.
But the thing is, in America, the doctors do not have collaborative power, and the doctors are very well paid in America. So too well paid, perhaps. And so they are interested in, keeping their incomes at a reasonable level, an American level. So it's a kind of lose-lose situation.
A comment just for Peter Curtis, just a greeting. I was one of your students at UNC many years ago. So good to see you.
Hi.
Okay. Cello?
Consuelo Echeverria, also commonly known as Cello from Healthcare for All Washington. Dr. Geyman, thank you so much for your presentation. I think it's really important as health advocates that we tie together all of these disparate pieces that are absolutely plundering every possible public entity in the United States, including now our water systems. So I really would like to thank you for that. It's really important the way that you brought it all together. It was really useful. My question for you is, it seems to me that Citizens United needs to really be in the front and center of all of our fights and overturning Citizens United. And in your opinion, what do you think some feasible strategies are, especially considering those amazing slides that you showed us about the disparities in wealth in this country?
Well, that's hugely important, as we all know. The politics behind getting the Supreme Court to join the world is pretty obscene. The Senator Whitehouse is so good at showing the conflicts of interest in the Supreme Court, which goes back 30 years or so. That Leonard Leo guy, very successful in getting a very conservative court. And look at it's appalling what even happened today. The Supreme Court hasn't decided anything about immunity. They're being threatened. It's very important in this election year to do it by the third week in October or so, the 23rd or whatever. Clarence Thomas with his wife, who was part of the lead up to January 6th. Here they say it's not a big deal. I mean, it's just appalling. So we need a new Supreme Court, but we got to get rid of a bunch of them.
Did anybody watch the PBS show Julius Caesar yesterday or the day before?
No.
Well, it's about how he became the dictator of the Roman Empire, having said that he would only be a dictator for 6 months to keep the empire safe, and all the people in the Senate were kind of agreed, thinking that he would stop then and then return everything to the Senate to decide. And of course, he didn't. He kept on being the dictator, and he ended up by being assassinated on the Ides of March. My fear is that we are, whatever John Geyman's brilliant exposition and excellent books in the past says, I fear we're heading more for a traumatic, dangerous situation in which healthcare will be a small player, because we'll be, except for all the people who are wounded and damaged and killed. That's my fear. And I'm a refugee from Second World War, so I know what happened then. Also, it makes me very worried about this supposed debate between Biden and Trump, because I think Trump will win hands down. He will just be an attack dog, and he will use the most horrible language. He will prance about, waving his arms, and Biden will sit there mumbling. It'll be worse than the debate between Hillary Clinton and him. So I'm very worried about that, because what the American public likes is violence and attack, part of our television menu, really. I think it'll be a very, very unpleasant show.
Is there a question in there, Peter, or are you just making
No, it's just
an observation?
David Frum wrote a good article in the Atlantic today about this. I'd recommend to all of you. It's not too long. It's very good.
John, do you have a comment about what was just said?
No, I just said it's one hell of a statement. No question, one hell of a statement, though, Peter Curtis made. I certainly listened to him. Yeah.
Okay, David McClanahan, you have your hand up?
Yeah, John, your book is great, but I was looking towards the last chapter or two. You were starting to talk about what are we going to do now with the upcoming election ahead of us, and possibly fascism beyond this election. What can we do? Is there anything we should be doing other than trying to turn out the vote?
Well, number one, we all can vote. Number two, we should be very engaged and talk to our friends and allies. There is this Disclose Act. There is the voting Freedom Act, the electoral college. There is a bill in the Congress that should go away. So there are things that can be done, but given this dysfunctional extreme House recurrent speakers, where that goes this coming week, we'll see. But you know, I don't anticipate very much change in the near term.
I just sort of coming to a conclusion here. So what I understand is that Medicare for all is really not very feasible right now because of private equity having bought up everything. And therefore, I understand we would have to buy them out, like an eminent domain, you know, like the water in California, you have to buy their rights to, you know, they're not going to give them to you. So I guess we can't do that, but so the only other way is to get them to approve Medicare for all for everyone, and that will just draw everybody away from them, I suppose, except that they're so dominant now, you can't find anybody to go see that is not part of those private equity operations, correct? Am I understanding this right?
They're pretty hard to find. Their penetrance is so great. I mean, the problem is they are increasingly controlling delivery. And we train less physicians in this country than any other developed country. And it was bad before the pandemic, and it's just gone from bad to worse. Anybody who's tried to establish care with a primary care provider, I mean, the only person you're going to see is an associate provider, an ARNP, or a brand new resident. Everybody else's practice is full. And even if you have an established relationship, you're probably not going to get to see anybody within a month or two that they're so full.
Experience it every day.
Yeah.
So I as a person that's been interested in this for many years, I guess I'm losing hope. I just don't know if I want to put my time into activism that I just don't see any. I just feel like I need to go to move to a country that's already got this established and try and save it there instead of trying to start it here. Am I being too negative?
Yes.
I mean, what do you guys all think? You guys have been involved in this forever, and do you have any hope at all?
We're going to win because they're going to price themselves out of business. We're going to win. We are going to win.
Okay.
I think so. And I think the other hope that I have is two things for this. I think we need to spread the word to young people. I plan to get 10 copies of your book, John, and give them to my sons and all of their contemporaries and, you know, a lot of people that I know. I think we need to work hard to get this work out. And I just have to commend you. This is a phenomenally up-to-date consensus of what's going on from a global perspective. And I just think it's something that every conscious person in this country should read. So my hope is in two contingencies, the young people and women, because the Republicans have alienated the vast majority of women in this country. And I think those two groups are probably our greatest strength, regardless of how they try to manipulate the electoral process. I just finished reading that book on moral injury by Wendy Dean that I would, it's backwards, of course, but is really good. I think that's very helpful. And John, I just once again want to commend you on an excellent job.
Well, thank you. Then going from your points there, I think it's not out of the question that the Dems could win big. It still seems unlikely, but I think they're going to win. It's possible, given reproductive rights and abortion and other key issues. The Dems could come back and take the Senate, the House, and the presidency. So that wouldn't surprise me either.
Heather Cox Richardson's most recent book, if you haven't read it, Democracy Reawakening, is also excellent. And she spoke in Seattle a couple of months ago, and she ended on a note of hopefulness, that, you know, if we get our heads behind the obvious truth that expose the degree to which our political and our medical and our financial spheres in this country have been horribly corrupted. I mean, Clarence Thomas is just a glaring example. I don't have dual citizenship, so Peter, I'm envious of you and some of your colleagues and some people that do. But I think, you know, we need to get our shoulders behind the wheel and mobilize the electorate. And John, I would like to see you on, you need to get on Amy Goodman and Tom Hartman and whatever other national media you can to push this book out. And I think all of us need to talk it up as much as we can.
So I see Don McCann has his hand up, and so does David Loud. So let's start with you, Don.
Okay, well, we do need to move ahead and really become active in this. This is John's book, and this has got to be our game plan, because the other book is from the Heritage Foundation, and this is the 900-page book that Trump is going to put into effect on day one if he's elected. And it is an awful book, and we cannot allow this. We have to go with John's program. So let's do it. Let's all be active. Sorry about that.
Okay, I like your statement. Is there a question attached or just the statement?
No question. It's just a statement.
Okay, that sounds fine. All right, David Loud, you're in.
Thank you. I just put into the chat a link to the Puget Sound Advocates for Retirement Action website, where there are two things that will come up immediately when you go there that you can do. One is to sign on to a national letter that is circulating to the Biden administration to take action to level the playing field between traditional Medicare and Medicare Advantage. There is, in fact, I think, reason to hope that if we get enough steam behind this, we can keep traditional Medicare alive and well enough to be there when we are in a position to expand it to a national program for all. And I want to just point out that in December, after this campaign for leveling the playing field has gotten some traction around the country during the last year, President Biden actually said we need to level the playing field. He didn't take any action on it. He didn't even define any action that he was going to take on it. But that's what this letter is about. The other thing you'll find as soon as you go to that website is a link to the online version of the very fine primer on this subject that David McClanahan mentioned. And he's going to show us again on the screen there. Yeah, it's a wonderful piece of work. And so I think despair is a guarantee of failure. If we despair, we know what's going to happen. And if we take action, we have a chance. And so the one other thing I'm going to say, and I'll put it in the chat, I didn't yet, there is, I assume that a lot of folks here, particularly the physicians and retired physicians among us, are able to make campaign contributions of some importance, whatever they may be. And there are a number of ways to think about it, but there's one in particular that my attention has been drawn to recently called the Movement Voter Project. The Movement Voter Project. And I'm going to put the link in there and take a look at it, because it's a very fine national program to target the best places and ways of building voter involvement and voter registration, particularly in the places where we are most at risk of succumbing to the fascist vote. So I'm going to put that in the chat. But like I say, you know, if we despair and give up, we know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think we owe it to ourselves and those who come behind us to to keep the faith.
Well, someone once said action is the antidote to despair. I usually try and live by that, but I'm sorry I was so negative, but I've been following this for so long, and you see most Americans agree with Medicare for all or some kind of universal health care. And when I've canvassed and gotten petitions, most people walk up and say, yeah, when are we going to do this? But we never, and then the newspapers, New York Times, they're always coming out with these exposés of this nonprofit hospital that was corporatized and it's taking taxpayer money, or some really bad scandal or two. And you see the comments, I mean, hundreds of comments, people going, yeah, okay, when are we going to do this? When are we going to do this? And we never seem to get that public opinion galvanized into forcing our elected officials to do it. And so I don't know what that next step is. And the only thing I can think of is media. I like the person that came up with the idea of Don McCann is really, very eloquent, and all you guys get on TV or something. We've got to make it bring people together about it, make it a national movement, and broaden the support for it so that they can't not do it. And I don't know how, but I think the media thing is a good idea, whoever said that.
Here's one further idea that we haven't touched on. It has always amazed me in looking through these years how apparently impotent medical organizations have been. They just haven't dealt with it. The internists did quite a bit. They looked at the ethics of what was happening, and that's good. But across the board, not too much has happened. That raises a question we haven't touched on here today. But in our healthcare system, perhaps we should increase the role of bringing together the similar reactions of other specialties to what's going on with us. And I think that might be useful, and I haven't seen that really happening much.
Okay, Consuelo has the question.
Yeah, I'm going to be very, very brief. David, on the petition, we have the option to sign on as an organization and as an individual. What do you recommend doing both, or how would you like us to approach this?
Well, certainly as individuals, and if you are a member of an organization and are authorized to sign on, of course, both.
But I suggest that each of you make an appointment tomorrow or the day after with the dean of your local public health school and go talk to that individual and see, A, will they join PNHP? B, will they let you talk to their master class of MPH students? I just put together a chapter here, the Yolo County chapter. It's all public health. I also drove down to mid-state to try and trap and meet and talk with the state public health director, who's a wonderful guy, an epidemiologist, and asked him if he would become a friend of mine forever and for us to talk about health transformation, notwithstanding that his boss, the governor, is not committed to single payer. But if we mobilize the public health system, they're our family. They're immediately right there, easy to talk to. And everybody has a public health school somewhere near them. And we need to mobilize this, go talk to the dean of the public health school and say to them, what about your students? What about you? What about the issue of why public health isn't hammering to make public health the top administrator for every single payer system nationwide, and to fight for a massive expansion of funding, because the public health system is so atrophied and so unfunded, that if we could mobilize that community, it's enormous. And we've been meeting every year with our national meeting next door to the APHA meeting. Many of our leaders have become chair people of the APHA National, but nothing has happened in terms of mobilizing and inserting public health leadership into our discussion about single payer. Nobody is talking about that. Why?
The governor is a single payer supporter. He has told me. He just doesn't talk about it publicly.
So was Obama. Obama was a single payer supporter
Right.
when Clinton
He
Young was
was,
taking care of
yeah.
him, but he's a bullshitter. He's done everything he can in order to distract and to create what they call
Politics.
United funding.
And
So
so
I'm
was our
not counting
senator.
on our governor doing anything unless he's forced to do it.
Our Senator Alex Padilla is in favor of single payer.
Yes, I think so. But let's go to the public health. Go to your public health dean this week, next week. Go there, meet them. It will really energize you, I promise you. And it'll be somebody that will understand the need for healthcare system reform.
Okay, our time is getting short here, so Hugh, go ahead with your last question or comment.
Well, it's more of a comment. I mean, look who we are. There's none of us in active practice. All of the people I know who are still in the active practice of medicine, they are like an infantry person in World War I. They are so pinned down in the trenches by the amount of clinical work and electronic paperwork that they have to do that they have no time and their families that they can carve out for activism for healthcare reform. Almost most of them agree with us, but it's just that they don't have the time nor the energy to expend. And somehow, and I think it's a great idea, Bill, to reach out to the leadership of our training institutions to try to get them as a vehicle to get this word out, because our students aren't taught this as well. Our medical students.
Most of the medical schools are under corporate control, and so the leadership of the medical schools are not as reliable or responsive as the leadership of the public health system for ideological reasons. But if you can go to the dean of their medical school and ask for an opportunity to talk to the medical class, the school, the kids, you know, I mean, that's a super important opportunity to try and mobilize those kids. They've been kept so busy. The students are as busy as the interns and the doctors.
Indentured servants who have to buy into the system to pay off their $300,000 worth of debt that they have when they graduate.
That's why I'm proposing globally budgeting all post-secondary public health education, all of it, so that kids don't have to come out of see, I just had an x-ray the other day. The x-ray technician is $50,000 in debt to get his license to be an x-ray technician. That's ridiculous. Hispanic kid. I mean, it's obscene. It's obscene. I think Hugh's notion of going to the youth, going to women, my suggestion is going to organized labor, you know, and working with them, and going to the public health system and looking at the website at ourhealth.pub, because all of these transformative ideas came after a year of working with 40 of you all in order to frame the most imaginative healthcare system that we could as a way of promoting a new conversation in the single payer balkanized movement.
I'd like to put in a plug for Puget Sound Activists for Retirement Action. They're full of labor people, and people have been organizers throughout their careers. You know, anybody can join, and you know, what's $50 a year or something like that, David? And
20.
20? Well, and you know, you get their newsletter every month. It's got tons of stuff. You get on the mailing list, and they've really been the main coordinator of coalition building in this neck of the woods. So anybody who lives in Washington State should be joining it.
David Lau, do you have your hand up?
Yes, just something that I'm reminded of from time to time. Not everybody knows how to save the chat. Down at the bottom of the screen in the chat are 3 little dots. If you click on those 3 little dots, it will save the chat and everything that's in it, and it'll open up in a different screen. So when we close this meeting, you'll still have that. Alternatively, if you go to any one of the individual links that are in the chat and you click on it, that will open up on another screen. So after the meeting is over, you can still go back to that material. I just wanted to say that in case people aren't clear about how to access things that are in the chat once the meeting is over.
When I send out the meeting report in a couple of days, I'll put all these links in the report so that if you missed them in the chat, you can get them in the report. Is everybody here on our blast list? PNHP Washington blast list. I have the emails of everybody who joined, so I'll put you on our list. Decide you want to get off it, it's easy to, get off it.
I think we will take your thoughts about approaching public health in Washington State, where most of us are.
Good.
And we'll talk about that in our board meeting, which, by the way, board members, it will be this coming Sunday at 11:30 in the morning on Zoom. But meanwhile, I think it is time to call it a night. And for you in North Carolina, it is definitely a night.
It was worth it.
See you,
Thank you.
Jim.
Right. And we want
Bye-bye.
to extend great thanks to Dr. John Geyman for coming and speaking to us tonight.
And it's been a great honor to be part of this group over these many years, and all the best to everyone I've seen.
Okay.
Bye.
Here, and if I get to Friday Harbor again, I will look you up again.
Please do. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Night.
3, 2, 1. Goodbye.